Okay, greetings everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Check on my channels here, make sure everything's up and good. And as always, hit that share, like, and subscribe button. If you're on Hecklebus, get over to El Perro. If you're on El Perro, get over to Keith Little. If you're on Keith Little, get over to Hecklebus. We're running all three channels now. Please hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons. There's a StreamYard link for anybody that wants to come up and join the panel for discussion. And there's PayPal links down in the detail section for anybody that would care to share some love. Every little bit counts. And then let's get started. As we've been talking about the Hitler's willing executioners, a reading by Jonah Goldhagen, and the views put forth as I interpret them is that the system and the way it works, the public education, indoctrination, the propaganda, the commercialism, the popularity contest, the political party, all of this stuff intertwines together as a series of conveniences and pathways to those conveniences. And this is what's really causing us problems. We are part of the problem. We don't realize it. And actually, we're a large part of that problem. See, it's the evil deeds that these other men do is only because we're allowing them. If we're truly the good people that want to put a stop to it, then the only way we can put a stop to it is by standing up. And the only way we can stand up is with confidence and knowledge. So again, that true benefit is knowledge. So we're going to go over some more reading here tonight out of this book from the first portion. And like I said, I might do a little more reading tomorrow night. Depends on how far we get through tonight. But then Wednesday night or so, we're going to be kind of skimming through it. And I'm just going to give you some highlighted points that I've come to in the book. So let's get back to it. Find my place here. Forgot to mark it. Remember to mark your spot, folks. Okay. So we discussed about the focus here was the German perpetrators. And like I said, the perpetrators are truly ourselves. We're the ones that are requiring of the supply and demand chain for those conveniences. If we didn't depend upon those conveniences and learn how to be responsible and take care of our own plenipotentiary powers, then we wouldn't need bankers and lawyers and all that. We'd be taking care of that stuff, of those private affairs accordingly. So the first task in restoring the perpetrators to the center of our understanding of the Holocaust is to restore them their identities. Grammatically, by using not the passive, but the active voice in order to ensure that they, the actors, are not absent from their own deeds. So this is implying that the record known as history is a list of actors, and they've been displaced as true beings because in that story told, they're nothing but actors. But we have to be able to put them with their true actions, which is the man that manifests those actions. As in 500 Jews were killed in city X on date Y. So it doesn't tell you the names of the victims or the people that killed them. They just tell you a number, where, and where. Or where and when. And by eschewing convenient, yet often inappropriate and obfuscating labels like Nazi and SS men. See, the Nazi is just a declination of something else that's a declination of something else that eventually ends up leading to the man who always has some kind of spiritual guidance, whether it be doing good works or which are heinously wrong. And calling them what they were, Germans. And again, as I just stated, it leads back to another declination that they weren't just Germans, they were men. And each and every one of those men individually has their own spiritual existence. The most appropriate, indeed, the only appropriate general proper name for the Germans who perpetrated the Holocaust is Germans. So again, when we see in the history books, it's still not going back to the original issue and giving the names of those men. And it's probably, because it's pretty much impossible. But again, that's just another separation from ourselves to the true facts and why history keeps repeating itself. They were Germans in the name of Germany and its highly popular leader, Adolf Hitler. Some were Nazis either by reason of Nazi Party membership or according to ideological conviction. Some were not. Some were SS men, and some were not. The perpetrators killed and made their other genocidal contributions under the auspices of many institutions other than the SS, other than Nazis. And like I mentioned the other night, even Ford contributed to the war by manufacturing military equipment for the Germans. So again, we have our very own perpetrators here on this soil, in my belief and opinion. Their chief common denominator was that they were all Germans pursuing German national political goals. In this case, the genocidal killing of Jews. To be sure, it is sometimes appropriate to use institutional or occupational names or roles and the generic terms perpetrators or killers to describe the perpetrators. Yet this must be done only in the understood context that these men and women were Germans first, and SS men, policemen, or camp guards second. So again, I'm going to profess that there were still men and women first before they were German men and women, German policemen, German SS men. A second and related task is to reveal something of the perpetrators' backgrounds. And this is why I say it's important to understand what you're doing in this world. We have bankers that don't understand banking. We have lawyers that don't understand lawyers. We have judges that don't understand judging. We have clerks that don't understand clerking. All kinds of stuff. And people are getting screwed left and right because they don't know how to conduct themselves. To convey the character and quality of their lives as genocidal killers, to bring to life their Lebenswelt. What exactly did they do when they were killing? What did they do during their time as members of institutions of killing while they were not undertaking killing operations? So again, it's not just the SS men that were doing the killing. It's the good people that allowed it to be done because they had ideological ideas that were similar. And so they kind of bent that way. And once they started benting, they got broke. Until a great deal is known about the details of their actions and lives, neither they nor the perpetration of their crimes can be understood. The unearthing of the perpetrators' lives, the presentation of a thick rather than the customary paper thin description of their actions, as important and necessary as it is for its own sake, lays the foundation for the main task of this book, consideration of them, namely to explain their actions. In other words, it's not just an economically driven system. It's not just a racially driven system. It's not just a politically driven system. It's not just an educational driven system. It's driven by all of those factors, and they're manipulative factors, every last one of them. So again, it's perpetrated on you because you don't know the manipulations and how to control them. It is my contention that this cannot be done, this is the author's view, of course, it is my contention that this cannot be done unless such an analysis is embedded in an understanding of German society before and during its Nazi period. So again, we're reading about the things that enhanced what Nazi Germany did during that time was something they got from extracultural activities elsewhere, and then they just adopted it and its means and employed it in their military tactics of war. Particularly of the political culture that produced the perpetrators and their actions. This has been notably absent from attempts to explain the perpetrators' actions and has doomed these attempts to providing situational explanations. So again, I'm trying to explain this is a repetition in history. It's not a situational thing. It's a repetition in history where situations present themselves and then are molded into that situation because the people molding it want the control. And again, those are manipulation factors for said control. Has doomed these attempts, ones that focused almost exclusively on institutional and immediate social, psychological influences. This is the public education system. This is the medical society. You're giving birth to children in a hospital instead of doing it naturally so that their spirituality can develop. Instead, you're having natural birth in a hospital and the manual development begins. Often conceived of as irresistible pressures. The men and women who became the Holocaust perpetrators were shaped by and operated in a particular social and historical setting. So even the author's own words imply kind of the same thing that I'm implying, is that it's your own fault. The true perpetrators are the social engineers of what goes on by the supply and demand chains. You're socially demanding it through everything that you post. So when we see things like in today's modern time with Trump, you know, the poor guy's going through multiple indictments, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to be convicted. I'm pretty sure even if he is, he's still going to run for the 2024 presidency. You can be a criminal and still run for president. It's not dependent upon a criminal record. Look at the Constitution. It's dependent upon residency. They brought with them prior elaborate conceptions of the world. Like again, as I said, they got these conceived ideas from previous people that committed heinous acts on their people and prisoners of war. Ones that were common to their society, the investigation of which is necessary for explaining their actions. This entails most fundamentally a re-examination of the character and development, and I'm going to say not just anti-Semitism in Germany, but the history of the same aggressions throughout time. When one society believes they have the authority to control another. Anti-Semitism in Germany during its Nazi period and before, which in turn requires a theoretical reconsideration of the character of anti-Semitism itself, of hate itself. And so I want to remind people, the scriptures talk both about hate and love in such a degree that I profess that I love you, but I don't give a fuck whether you love me back, because I have to hate myself and even my own life if I'm going to follow Christ. And if you don't understand how you can love and hate at the same time, love thyself as thy neighbor, it's the fact that I hate myself so much that I'm not going to do anything to another man unless I absolutely have to. And that is only to fend for my life. And I will put up my entire life up for that. I will not bow down on my knees for anybody. The men and women who became the Holocaust perpetrators were shaped by and operated in a particular social and historical setting. So the shaping is by the author agrees, is by the historical readings that you're reading. The historical articles that you're reading is shaping your mind. Learn what they're saying by being able to correlate this event with a previous event, with the previous event, with the previous, be able to see the repetition. It's only through that repetition of observances that are recorded in history that we're going to be able to ideologically come to our senses someday, I hope, and put a stop to this. The whole human race can't be insane. I do admit that most of them need to fucking grow up, though. They brought with them prior elaborate conceptions of the world, ones that were common to their society. Common to their society. You got to get over that, folks. Everybody's stepping into the convenience of doing what's common. The most common things, giving birth in a hospital and sending your kids off to a public education center. And those are the two biggest problems in your life. Studies of the Holocaust have been marred by a poor understanding and under-theorizing of anti-Semitism. And I'm going to say that, again, this seems to go in line with the fact that I think we need to take it back through time and see how it repeats itself, not just in relation to anti-Semitism, but every warring faction of one society rising up against another. It's the same thing. It's hate. Anti-Semitism is a broad, typically imprecisely used term, and that's because it's trying to delineate anti-Semitism to Jews. And I would, again, express that we need to broaden that throughout the entire history and see how it's similar in the one element of hate. Typically, imprecisely used term encompassing a wide variety of phenomena. It wouldn't be such a phenomena if you would be able to see it through time and correlate it. Hey, this is the same thing happening over and over again. And I'll be damned if it's not us causing it, if it's not us doing it. This naturally poses enormous obstacles for explaining the perpetration of the Holocaust, because the central task of any such attempt is to evaluate whether and how anti-Semitism produced and influenced its many aspects. Well, the anti-Semitism, again, if you relate it to hate, is something that seeps through all those various different venues: the political venue, the economical venue, the spiritual venue, the family venue, the social venue. It seeps through that because of the ideological concept of that group of people. It is the very rise of that distinct war. And it's, again, a common concept in a group of people, all heightened by one guy that says he's their leader. I urge you to quit following. Okay, Holocaust because of central task. In my view, our understanding of anti-Semitism and of the relationship of anti-Semitism to maltreatment of Jews is deficient, saying there's not enough said about it. We must begin considering these subjects anew and develop a conceptual apparatus that is descriptively powerful and analytically useful for addressing the ideational causes of social action. I don't know, I've ever heard that word before, and I'm surprised I didn't highlight it. The first chapter is devoted to initiating such a theoretical reconsideration. And again, I agree. We need a theoretical reconsideration to not just be inclusive of anti-Semitism and say that that's a broad statement. I think we need to broaden it to everything and define it literally as hate. The study of the perpetrators further demands a reconsideration, indeed a reconceiving of the character of German society during its Nazi period and before. And again, hate seems so simple. Even a child understands that. You don't have to explain that you hated him because he was a Jew. You just say you hated him. Well, why? Well, because we don't think alike. It's that simple. So therefore, why is there really any need to go to war for it? The Holocaust was the defining aspect of Nazism, but not only of Nazism. It was also the defining feature of German society during the German period, or Nazi period. No significant aspect of German society was untouched by Jewish policy, from the economy to society to politics to culture, from cattle farmers to merchants to the organization of small towns to lawyers, doctors, physicists, and professors. No analysis of German society, no understanding or characterization of it can be made without placing the persecution and extermination of the Jews at its center. The program's first parts, namely the systematic exclusion of Germans from German economic and social life, were carried out in the open, under approving eyes, and with the complicity of virtually all sectors of German society, from the legal, medical, teaching professions to the churches, both Catholic and Protestant, to the gamut of economic, social, and cultural groups and associations. Hundreds of thousands of Germans contributed to the genocide and the still larger system of subjugation that was the vast concentration camp system. They didn't want them in their neighborhood, so they would call up the Gestapo and say, hey, there's one lives right there. Sound familiar? We're doing that today. We believe that the government is corrupt, but then we believe that some neighbor down the street is more corrupt. So we're going to call a corrupt guy to come pick up this other corrupt guy. Good job. Despite the regime's half-hearted attempts to keep the genocide beyond the view of most Germans, millions knew of the mass slaughters. Millions knew of the mass slaughters, not just in Germany, but around the world. Hitler announced many times emphatically that the war would end in the extermination of the Jews. The killings met with general understanding, if not approval. No other policy or similar or greater scope was carried out with more persistence and zeal and with fewer difficulties than the genocide, except perhaps the war itself. The Holocaust defines not only the history of Jews during the middle of the 20th century, but also the history of Germans. It's a defining moment in both. While the Holocaust changed Jewry and Jews irrevocably, its commission was possible, I argue, because Germans had already been changed. I want to take a moment real quick to remind everybody, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. I am on 3 channels at the moment: Keith Little, L. Perro, and Hecklebus. So if you're not on the others, please go over there and hit that like, share, and subscribe button, help the algorithms. And what I want to point out here is we're at the same point in time right now, and people are talking about it. Been murmuring for a few years. You got the pandemic, whatever you want to call it, and people are getting up in arms, and they're really not with this ideological bullshit that's going on. So we're in a state of time that's similar to that. We're in a state of time where people are going to start taking along an ideological view and stick with it sternly because they're done with the bullshit. And I urge you again, if you're going to take an ideological view and stand for it, make sure it has a solid principle. Don't be trying to use a political principle, an economic principle, educational principle. Make sure it's solid and it comes from the spirit. Otherwise, you're going to end up just like part of the German society. You're going to think you're one of the good guys, and you're actually going to be one of the perpetrators. So I really urge people to think about this stuff. It's hardcore to think back on your own self and reflect on your own actions and admit that you've been that bad person, that you've been one of the ones that's allowed this killing to go on, even though you aren't directly involved in the killing. I assure you, some cop's got his foot on somebody's neck. I'm not going to stand there with a camera. I'm going to do something about it. I don't know why you don't. You already know it's inherently wrong. You don't snuff the life out of a man right before you just because you're wearing a badge. There's no excuse for it whatsoever, particularly when they have no authority to do so. Everything is commercial, folks. Everything they do is commercial. They have no right to protect. They have no duty to protect you. That means if they do, then the only reason they would be doing so is in their common law aspect as a man being led by their spirit. Every other venue is commercial, and they're led by the manual, the things written in the books. Learn the difference. Learn how to conduct your own affairs and quit letting other people take your authority by giving it up. You have to learn how to stand one day or another. You're full-grown peoples. So, hundreds of thousands of Germans contributed to the genocide, and still larger system of oh yeah, we already read that. Hitler announced many a times, where am I at? Where am I at? See, I keep losing my spot. Each of these reconceivings of the perpetrators of German anti-Semitism and of German society during the Nazi period is complex, requires difficult theoretical work, and the marshaling of considerable empirical material, and ultimately is deserving of a separate book in its own right. Empirical meaning absolute fact. You cannot deny it. And that's why I say it's absolute fact. These aren't just Germans. They're not just SS men. Before they become SS men, they were men with living souls. And that's the counterpart we have to take recognition of. Even though there's no name in those history books, or may not be all of the names, we have to recognize the living soul and the atrocities that were placated against some by others. These are atrocious acts that we're not supposed to be doing at any time, let alone during the Jewish anti-Semitism genocide or any other war throughout history, Ukrainian war now, whatever it is. We're not supposed to be doing that stuff, period. We're placing judgment on other men. That's his job. While the undertaking of each one is justifiable on its own theoretical and empirical grounds, each, in my view, is also strengthened by the others, for they are interrelated tasks. Together, the three suggest that we must substantially rethink important aspects of German history, the nature of Germany during the Nazi period, and the perpetration of the Holocaust. This rethinking requires, on a number of subjects, the turning of conventional wisdom on its head and the adoption of a new and substantially different view of essential aspects of this period, aspects which have generally been considered settled. And again, that's part of the problem. They consider them settled, but yet when you look through history, it repeats itself. So how could it truly be settled? It rises again. So the essential view here, in my opinion, is that we learn to recognize when it's rising. Like I just said a couple minutes ago, we're at a point in time where we're set in our ways and we're ready to fight. And it's because we know something inherently, something's coming up, and we're preparing for that. So we're changing certain things. And that's because certain things were changed drastically here recently over the last few years. And it created quite the upsetting circumstances. We really have to take a good look at what's going on and our part in it. You know, we've got future statistics coming up where they're going to be talking about death tolls and this and that as it relates to that pandemic thing. And, you know, it's always going to be questioned because it started out in question. So do you really want to believe that kind of stuff? Or do you want to learn how to start doing your research and reading, go back and relearn how to read, relearn the concise English language as you're supposed to know it? It would be a great help in your own comprehension of what's going on. So, explaining why the Holocaust occurred requires a radical revision of what has until now been written. That this book is that revision. And again, I don't know that it really is. If it's going to be deemed settled repeatedly throughout time, and that's merely a way to tell the people, well, it's been settled, we can go on with a new way of life. And here we are. That's the point of time we're at. We're coming up in a new way of life. They're deeming things settled. And we've got to quit that. We've got to let them know we're done with this. We're not going to keep repeating it. And that can only be done through the education. This revision calls for us to acknowledge what has for so long been generally denied or obscured by academic and non-academic interpreters alike. And that's the repetition in history. They placate them as their own separate wars for this different reason, but it's the same situation, a hateful situation. Germans' anti-Semitic beliefs about Jews were the central causal agent of the Holocaust. They were the central causal agent not only of Hitler's decision to annihilate European Jewry, which is accepted by many, but also of the perpetrators' willingness to kill and to brutalize Jews. The conclusion of this book is that anti-Semitism moved many thousands of ordinary Germans and would have moved millions more had they been appropriately positioned to slaughter Jews. Not economic hardship, not the coercive means of a totalitarian state, not social psychological pressure, not invariable psychological propensities, but ideas about Jews that were pervasive in Germany and had been for decades, induced ordinary Germans to kill unarmed, defenseless Jewish men, women, and children by the thousands, systematically and without pity. When we take another man, woman, or child and blame them for our problems, then we really are delusional. And I urge everybody to think about this stuff. You know, I'm not the perfect guy. I never have been. You can look at the criminal record. You can see the civil record. You can see there's a lot of complaints and this and that on there. I had my part in it. So I'm not sitting here saying I'm perfect. I'm sitting here telling you I'm the bitch-ass slave. I'm the fool. But I'm changing and I'm growing. And there's a big difference. I'm not going to sit in the same pool and do the same kinds of things that history says 98% of the people have done repeatedly, because they take upon conveniences in that ideological society structure and say, well, we're going to look out for each other. And that's the last thing you do. You sit there and watch the boob tube, watching somebody else's dramatic life because it's obviously better than yours. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting in the front of a boob tube doing nothing but watching a boob tube. So then you hear the lights and sirens and you look out and you see them hauling one of your neighbors off a couple blocks down the street. You go right back to the couch, start stuffing your face with the processed foods and drinking the poison. Next night, same thing. You hear them lights and sirens. They're down the other end of the block, hauling somebody else off. The next night, same damn thing. They're right across the street. The next night, they're over here at your neighbor's. When do you think they're coming after you? When do you think they're going to start hating on you? Oh, wait a minute. There's all kinds of people already hating on you, isn't there? And you're hating right back. Keep firing those flames, or keep fueling those flames. Keep blowing on them. And you walk yourself right into it. You're your own perpetrator. So anyway, that's the end of tonight's reading. Like I said, I'll be back tomorrow night with a little bit more. And then we're going to go into some highlighting I've done in the book. So I want everybody to remember that I love you. I don't give a fuck whether you love me back or not. God bless. Have a good night. We'll see you again tomorrow night.